Hello everyone and welcome to this video in which we're going to be building a mobile app with Bluetext. Our mobile app is a stock management app for airplane staff and it makes use of Couchbase Lite to store data locally and then a sync gateway to refresh the main Couchbase database with the new data once connection is reestablished. We can go ahead and give our app a quick test, or rather the Couchbase functionality a quick test. So I'm going to go ahead and decrease the stock if we sell 5 or 6 travel neck pillows and retrieve our docs. As you can see previously, the quantity was 72, but now it's gone down to 67. To start building this app, I use Bluetext tools to scaffold out the infrastructure that we needed for the app. So our Couchbase server, which is the main source of truth for data, the sync gateway, which is responsible both for authentication, but also for keeping the main Couchbase server synced with the Couchbase Lite running on the devices. I'm also running a Flutter dev container, which is basically a containerized build server with the full Android SDK that compiles and pushes the app over ADB to an Android emulator running locally on my Mac. We're going to rebuild this app from scratch so I can show you how to take advantage of Bluetext tools to quickly set up the infrastructure needed for your project, so you can maybe implement this or make use of it for the hackathon. We are going to be developing locally, so there is a checklist of what you will need to have on your computer for you to progress. You need to have a coding agent that allows MCP configuration, an Android emulator, Bluetext extension, Polytope. All right, the first step is to make sure that you have Android Studio downloaded, and then once you open that, from here, you can see Virtual Device Manager. Click that. I already have 2 that I've created before that I can reopen, but you can just create another one from here. So I'm going to go ahead and run my emulated Android phone, and as you can see, by default, it is listening on port or the emulator runs on 5554. However, if we go on our terminal and look up ADB devices just to verify that it's visible, we can see that it's there as well. So we should double check that. Then make sure that you have Polytope installed, which is this command right here in the terminal. Make sure you also have a coding agent. I have Klein and Claude both installed. We can see Klein here and then Claude right here. But I'm going to be switching between the 2 depending on which one works better for my project. And then finally, if you head over to the extension marketplace and search Bluetext, you can download this extension right here. From here, we will just be calling the tools, the MCP tools directly. So I'm not going to cover it in this video for Claude, but for Klein, if you have the Bluetext extension and you press start developing, it already configures Klein under the hood to have access to our MCP tools. So once the stack starts and we head on over to Klein, we should be able to see, you can ignore this top one here, but we should be able to see Polytope MCP server, and you can just press retry and then we're connected, which means the agent can call our tools now. Then we can head on over to the Bluetext extension and scaffold out our services that we require. So I'm going to start with the Couchbase server. So what this does is it scaffolds out a template for a Couchbase server and runs the service and adds it to our stack. So we can now see in our Polytope UI, if we navigate here with our arrow keys, that Couchbase is exposed, the Couchbase UI anyway, is exposed on port 8091. Now that we have the Couchbase server up and running, we can run the service config manager. This is what's going to be responsible for setting up our key space within Couchbase and essentially getting our Couchbase server to a state where it is ready to accept or store data. One more thing that we should do here is we go to one more thing we should do here is we select add to managed services. Then we type in the name of our Couchbase server, which is, because we left it blank, it's just Couchbase server. And it's of type Couchbase. So then we select run tool. Great. So now that the logs are telling us that that's done, we can head on over to 8091 and we can see that our Couchbase server is been initialized, or our key space rather has been initialized. If we go here to documents, we can see our key space has been initialized there. So we can continue with this and add our next service. So what I usually add if I'm making a mobile app after the Couchbase server is configured and added, I would add the rest of the Couchbase stuff. So I would add the sync gateway. So if we just run sync gateway from here and again leave everything blank, this is what's responsible for getting the data from Couchbase Lite to the Couchbase server. Now, Couchbase Lite is what's going to be running on the mobile device, but it's also responsible for authentication. The last tool we will be adding is the Flutter dev container. From here is where we're going to be doing the main chunk of our development for the Android app. Now, you can also make an iOS app from here. However, we found it a lot easier to get from building to testing with Android, given our setup. Once we start the Flutter dev container, when it's completely initialized and installed all the dependencies, it's going to request to build the Android app, the template app that we have created now, via ADB on our emulator. It's given that your emulator is running on 5554, that means it's exposed through ADB on 5555. So now you can see once our Flutter dev container has been built and all the dependencies have been installed, it's telling us current status unauthorized waiting. If you want to do some development before actually building the app or seeing what the template looks like, you could just ignore this and make changes to the code base, but you can also see what the template looks like. So let's do that. So our emulator is now telling us allow USB debugging, and then we can select allow. Now you can check in the logs that we've pressed this and we've confirmed it, and it's going to go ahead and build our app. This, depending on your setup, might take some time. So we're going to come back when this is done. All right, so now that that's done, we can see allow workspace to access the device's location. We're going to go ahead and accept this and allow. So the template app is a very simple counter app. We can change this value to maybe 5 and then go back to our Couchbase UI and log in. And then if we see our counter at the bottom, the data is being persisted there via sync gateway. We also have mesh sync enabled, which in later versions of Bluetext will be its own separate tool. By the time of the hackathon, this might already be, in which case you would just add it via the implement mesh sync tool, which would be found right here. So I'm going to go ahead and design my first and hopefully final prompt, because while the infrastructure is set up already for the coding agent to know which direction to take it in. So I'm going to actually try on a one-shot this, because if you think about it, the stock counter app that we're making is essentially this, what I just showed you. Okay, the logic may be duplicated 20 times for each different, or made use of 20 different times for each of the different stocks that or items that we're keeping track of, but I'm going to go ahead and make my prompt. So I'm going to say we have a mobile app running in Polytope which stores the number of times a button has been clicked. Then I'm just going to say make it look like a mobile app for Croatia Airlines staff. So we do have hot reload enabled in our mobile app, or in the Flutter dev container rather. However, some changes made to the Couchbase logic do require a restart. So in that case, we would just restart the stack, which I can show you how to do once the agent is finished. So now it's calling a bunch of tools like initialize sessions so that it can, I guess, become more aware of the nature in which our app is running. And once that's finished, it's going to start making changes to the code. And once it's finished making changes to the code, because it's aware of the nature in which our app is running, it's going to say at the very end, please restart the stack so that you can see or test the changes. We're going to come back when that's done, and then I'll show you how to restart the stack and we can view the app that it created. So our coding agent there, I guess I wasn't clear enough that I just wanted to work on Android because, of course, our Flutter dev container also has functionality for iOS, or supports iOS, but we're not going to be using that right now. It added it in the to-do list to add stock item methods to native iOS plugin, but I just said we don't want that. We just want it to work on Android. So I guess be clear about that when you're prompting in the future. All right, so now the coding agent wants to restart the stack. However, I'm going to do this myself because I think it's very handy and you will probably need to do it during the hackathon at some stage. So if you click on Polytope's UI anywhere, I think it restarted the container. That's why it says right now unauthorized waiting. But I'm going to press Control C and press enter. And then you can either press start developing in the extension to start it again, but all that actually does in the terminal is writes the following command, which is pt run stack mcp, and then the extension senses that Polytope is running and then switches back to its tool view. So again, we have to approve the rebuilding process. So we're going to come back when it requests ADB debugging or permissions for that. So I just confirmed the debugging on the device. Sometimes you just have to click the screen on the Android emulator if nothing's popping up, and then the pop-up will show up. All right, so we have now finished building our app. I accepted debugging once again, and while it doesn't really look like Croatia Airlines, I don't know if you're familiar with that, it does look really really professional actually, and it tells you, like, indicates if you're running low on any stock. We're going to give a Couchbase demo of functionality in a second. Because the emulator is running on its own network, it's kind of hard to test mesh sync, but this template that I scaffolded out now did have mesh sync enabled, and as you can see on the top right, it tells you how many peers would be connected if there were if you could find a way to test that. Now we're going to go to our Couchbase UI, and I've filtered for stock white wine because just nice to have one on the screen here at a time. So let's say, I don't know what could be happening on this flight, but let's say all of a sudden the stock of white wine decreases by, I don't know, 31, and then we would refresh this, and then we can see our count has decreased to 39 via our sync gateway, updating our main Couchbase server. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you can take away some of what you learned or what I showed in this video into your project. and that maybe you can make use of Bluetext to get by the initial steps of setting up your infrastructure a lot quicker. Thank you very much, and see you guys on Tuesday.